All right, so there's going to be a lot of people who say you should be able to shoot any caliber right off the bat. Being more proficient with 9mm as opposed to 45, you can see in my first round here, these shots were a little bit on the rough side. As the course of the day went through and you shoot more rounds, you get a little bit more proficient with what you're shooting. So training, everybody. It's very important. Of course, as the day progresses and you get a little more efficient with the new caliber that you're shooting, you tend to be able to reduce the size of the groupings. Even this one isn't that great, but you can see it's getting a little bit more accurate as I go along. You're getting some more of those center shots. Again, still some drifting out, but still compact enough to be effective shots if need be. All right, guys, so we're back at the table with the M&P 2.0 in the 45. So what are my overall impressions about this handgun? Well, first off, it's a great shooting handgun. I don't think anybody would argue that Smith and Wesson really did a nice job when they redesigned the M&P series. When I initially looked at the M&P, I was kind of iffy about it, but now that I've had the experience of owning them and shooting them, I have absolutely zero complaints about these handguns. There's just nothing that I can say is negative to the point where it would change my mind not wanting to buy one. Obviously, my biggest beef with the gun is going to be the stock trigger, but that's easily replaceable with an Apex trigger kit. Now, of course, some may say, but you're paying for a handgun and you're putting a trigger in it. I get it. I understand that. However, when you look at the costs and the offset of those costs, just to update this trigger, or upgrade, I should say, what you're going to find is that it actually makes this gun, in my opinion, in the top 5 of all striker-fired handguns. And to me, $100 extra when you're buying, or you're able to buy these guns at a very fairly reasonable cost right now, to me, it's kind of a negated point. And the reason why I say that is because you're getting a great trigger, you're getting a good priced handgun that's built very, very solidly. And honestly, you're probably going to save money in the long run based on the fact that even with the trigger and the gun, you're still probably coming in the same range, maybe as, let's say, a P10, so to speak. Obviously, Glock's a little bit more expensive, but again, it's going to be up to you what you prefer. Now, the interesting thing about the 45 is this kind of a tale of two cities for this handgun. And what I mean by that is that the gun is a very good gun. Look, I'm not going to lie to you guys and tell you that I don't like this handgun, because I most certainly do. But the one thing that I would say to you is that when you decide to go with this handgun, and again, this particular handgun, which again is the 45, you're really going to have to make a decision if you want to get a 45 or if you want to stay in the 9mm or even the 40 range. Now, one of the things that I think for myself personally is I own a lot of 9mm. This is really the only 45 I own. And for me, I had to think about, do I really want to, have a 45? Now, some people may say, you know what, you have to. If you own guns, you should definitely own a 45. And I understand that school of thought. However, when you think about it overall and you're looking at this handgun as a daily carry gun, you have to realize that once you drop 10 rounds into this, you've got your steel magazine inside the grip frame of this, you're adding more weight. And over the time, if you're carrying a lot, that weight may be a deterrent for you. Now, again, I'm not saying one way or another if you should get this or not. What I'm simply saying is it's definitely something you need to consider if you choose to go with this 45 versus the 9. Now, would this deter me from carrying it? No, it wouldn't, because, again, is the weight so, I guess you could say, so overbearing that it would make it uncomfortable to wear? No. Again, good gun belt, good holster, you have no problems. But I think depending on the person, that is certainly something they'd want to look at. Sometimes weight is a major factor, especially as we see people going more and more to smaller guns, single stack guns, tiny guns, micro guns, whatever you want to call them. They look at something like this as maybe just too big to carry. Now, again, to each their own, it's going to be up to you to decide that. Now, overall, what did I think about shooting the handgun? The recoil was obviously negligible in my opinion. Again, there's nothing else modified except for the trigger in this, nothing else. So there is no recoil spring that was new. The sights are stock. Again, the only thing I upgraded was the trigger, but that's personal preference. Now with the recoil, again, most people describe the 45 as a pushing as opposed to a muzzle flip. Now for me, honestly, I didn't notice a major difference. I'm trying to think, in my mind when I was shooting this, did I really feel anything? I think maybe a little bit. You felt a little bit more of that kind of like a pushing motion to your hand, which really made you want to sit on that gun a little bit more to control it. And it's definitely a different feeling from the 9mm. So that's something, if again you're familiar with the 9s and you go to a 45, you're gonna have to spend a little bit more time just getting used to that. And again, that was something that I noticed right off the bat for me, especially when I look at some of the the early shooting with the gun when I first started off. It was a little bit on the wild side. But nonetheless, I mean, it handled everything. 200 rounds later, it was fantastic. The gun is, again, I have not oiled the gun. I haven't cleaned the gun. The only thing I did was wipe the outside of the slide. But, after looking at this handgun, let me see if I can get that. Hopefully it'll focus. But after looking at this handgun, guys, I mean, the gun looks great. I mean, it's just 200 rounds. You don't see really any, brass or anything. Obviously here you do. But it just looks really solid, very smooth. The finish is still in great shape. So, I mean, overall, in my opinion, fit and finish on this handgun is fantastic, especially being it was a used gun, and I even put more rounds through it. The Apex trigger, I don't know what else I can do to convince people to buy this trigger. The trigger is just so buttery smooth on these handguns. It makes the gun extremely controllable. You don't really have a lot of hand movement, and you guys know my hands shake a little bit. So it just makes it a lot easier for me to be able to maintain control of the handgun. And I know some people may say, oh, well, what if you accidentally discharge it? Well, I have a little bit more trigger discipline than that, guys. But overall, fantastic. Again, magazines fed everything very, very well. Again, ejection of the magazines was very positive and felt really good. So I don't know what else to say about these guys. If you have not experienced shooting an M&P 2.0, whether it's a 45, whether it's a 9, whatever size it is, you guys should go out and get one. Again, they're not paying me to say that. I'm simply saying because I've had nothing but positive, awesome experiences with these handguns. And again, if you look at the price points, like right now, I got this 3 1/4 used. I know my first 4 1/4 I got, I think was in the like 3 something range. So, I mean, they're definitely there. The deals are there to be had. You just have to look for them. And when you see one, take the leap, man, because it's fantastic. And, the grip feels good. One of the things I did notice, because I was shooting an awful lot of handguns that day, was that of all the handguns, as my hand began to sweat, I mean, I think I put about 700 rounds that day through everything, total wise. But what I did notice was that after a while, your hand begins to sweat a little bit. The place was pretty warm, and the gun that actually held the best was this one. And again, some people may say it's a little bit too aggressive, and yeah, you can definitely sand the grip down. But guys, remember, it is a handgun, and this aggressive grip is going to give you better control. And I think that has a lot to do with the fact of why these are so nice to shoot. You don't have to worry about necessarily losing control or getting a little bit, I guess you could say, slippage in your hand, especially if it's wet. Some people say bloody, whatever you want to call it. Now, again, the 3-dot sights, not too good. Very dim, so it was a little difficult to really get a nice picture, but, it is what it is. Overall, I think it's just a great gun. I've had no issues with it. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. I mean, what are your final thoughts on these M&P 2.0s? If you have experience with them, tell us what you think, and leave the comments down below, and hopefully you enjoyed the review. Again, we just hit over 6,000 at the channel. So guys and gals, thank you very much for following the channel. I really appreciate it. Obviously, I can't exist without any of you. And even those for you, give me the thumbs down, because you must be subscribers, since every time I drop a video. So they count too. So up or down, doesn't matter. Just happy to be a part of it. So I hope you guys have a great night. Stay safe. And as always, freedom is never free.